delighted that all of you could come today to listen to the webinar on behaviorally smart family dynamics. I'm excited to introduce Mike Baduzzi, who's the managing partner of VINCI Global Consulting, to talk about some of the key issues relating to family dynamics. Mike and I have been working in this area together collaboratively for the last 15 years. Since I first came to the United States, I had the great fortune to meet Mike, and we have built a deep connection and friendship in this area of family dynamics, which is something we're very passionate about. And we also, our passion and purpose with it gets down to behavior and how different family members tick and what their different needs are. And Mike has built some great programs to serve families in the United States and even globally on how they can deal with the human issues that relate to the passing on of wealth and building a sustainable quality of family life, and also for managing the money. An area that Mike's moving into that I'm very excited about is a Rising Leaders Forum, which is really helping the emerging leaders in the family, particularly where there's a family business involved, be able to take over the family business and address the issues from their lens that they're facing. I think this is an important development. We often look at it from the perspective of the family leader and what do they do, but we've also got to understand the impact of any decision that the family leader makes on the family members and what is their voice in it. So without any further ado, I'm going to hand the microphone, as it were, to Mike to talk about family dynamics and the work he's doing to help families have an enriching life.
Thank you, and to your team over there, Leon, Tripp, and Bridget, for all your help. What I'd like to do today is to start part one of what will be a four-part series on family dynamics and how it relates to advisors in their work and their interrelations with their clients. Hopefully you'll find this enlightening. And I would say at the top of this is that I know the people listening have different types of firms and different emphasis and different focus. So I hope I tried to design this so that everyone may get a little bit of something regardless of how you're structured. Let me start by talking a little bit about how things evolved for me, because I started my career in 1975 with a major insurance company, and up until 2010 was an advisor myself. So as I go through this process, I'd like to, sort of speak, take you into my journey and my world as I've transitioned from an advisory practice all the way to the dark side of a consulting firm and no longer provide advisory services. What you see in front of you is the Vitruvian Man, a symbol that is connected to Da Vinci, which is the namesake of our company. And what this represented was how human beings interrelated with their environment. And as I started to think about these types of issues of how human beings interact with advisors, in 1999, actually, I started asking my clients what was the most important thing I could do for them outside of money. And actually, money was not one of the things they mentioned that much when I asked that question. They said it was if you could help my children or grandchildren on the right path in life, if you can help to reconcile me to my spouse, if you can help to reconcile me to an estranged child that maybe I didn't have a chance to develop a relationship with when I was building my business. And when I heard those types of responses, I became curious, started meeting with a group of psychologists back in 2000 to ask the question, as fast as the world was moving, and again, that was back then, it's moving so much faster today, how do human beings interact with their advisory team or their planning team? And so that started a great journey for me, and hopefully you'll find some of this to be interesting as we go through this. Da Vinci today provides consulting services to operating companies, business owners, families of wealth, and nonprofits. Now, I know what probably you're interested in is probably similar to what I was interested in, which is attracting the target clients that I envision for my firm, the right clients, and to be able to retain those clients and grow the services I provided to them. Also, of course, to serve future generations and build a company and a team of great talent and to increase the firm's revenue and marketability and value. And so with that in mind, let's look at a few different professional practice models that exist today. First, I want to look at the traditional advisor, and this is a advisory firm that is at the top of the game, and they're extremely focused on what they do well. They really don't deploy any type of human behavior assessments or deal with that at all, and I would say that represents about 75% of the marketplace. The second model is what I would call a values-based advisor. These are people that are primarily focused on the technical aspects of providing professional services, but they starting to incorporate some level of human behavior analysis and employing that within their practice. The third is a quasi-consulting advisor, and this is a person that's really integrating human dynamics and the way human beings interact in their world together with the services they're provided and how they communicate those services. And then lastly is really a firm that provides primarily from a human dynamics or a human perspective and delivers services customized to each person and their preferences, and focuses on them as human beings first and foremost, and that represents less than 5%. So you can see along the bottom there, just anecdotally, what I think is probably a representation of firms. So let's take our first poll question, Trip.
Thank you, Mike. Just real quick, get a pulse check here. Which professional practice model most closely resembles your firm? So go ahead and check one of the following, and we'll just, we'll see where everybody sits. And that's a pretty good cross-section right there. We'll go ahead and close the polls and share those results. And so we've got a number of quasi-consultant advisors out there, but otherwise fairly well mixed across the board. I'll hide those and let you go back to it, Mike. Thanks.
Great, Trip. So let's look at what we're talking about when we're talking a little bit more about the human dynamics aspects of an advisory practice. Most professional firms are very left-brain oriented. As you can see there, they're very logical, sequential. Things tend to be looked at in a linear manner. In the poetic terms, it's the words of the song that they focus on, the computations and the facts, whereas the right brain really involves more of a holistic thinking, being creative, innovative, adapting to the human aspects of things, more of the art versus the science of the left brain, and more of the actual tune of the song instead of the words of the song. So that would be a good way of kind of giving you an idea of how we might look at the differences between firms in that respect. If we look at art and science and we look at how to be the most productive, if you think of any human activity, or even think of something as simple as a laptop, probably engineers could design a laptop that's more efficient than the ones we use every day, but they have to do it in such a way that we can interface with the technology. If they don't do that, then they don't have maximum results. So we need to focus on not only just the technical aspects, but again, adapting that to human behavior. So from a perspective where we looked at how some firms along those lines are designed, you have the specialist firm that focuses, say, on portfolio management, might be an example there, or certain types of law, where on the other end of the spectrum is more of the human behavior, organizational behavior type of firm, of consulting firm. Then you have these firms starting to gravitate towards what I might call as the apex there, which is firms that bring both the human and the technical in great competency to those people that they serve. So somewhere along that spectrum, all of us are. As far as where we are, Da Vinci, we're in the more the pink circle and the orange circle at the top. and we integrate, we work with professional advisors that provide services that we don't. So what we have to look and talk about, why is this really important, this a human aspect of things. And so each of your clients are driven by 5 different needs. And those are, of course, survival to begin with. But the other ones are extremely powerful in their own right and really drive people and motivate people to take action. And as you look at that list, you could identify some that are somewhat more money-centric, where a lot of them aren't. And so that's why it's important to have that balance that we're going to be talking about. As we think about how people behave, there's really 4 different ways: how we act, think, feel, and the physiology, which refers, of course, to our body and how we respond to our physical condition. And the 2 things in that we can control is how we act or think, but we can't control how we feel. Now, we can control how we might express those feelings, but we can't control that we have feelings. And so to work with human beings and to try to serve them without being able to address the feeling component of who they are as human beings stops short of what is possible to get the maximum benefit delivered to those clients. There's a professor at Harvard who's deceased now, but he was considered the father of human behavior, or at least one of the fathers. His name was Chris Argyris, and he came up with a model that he studied, which is how people act and not act, how they decide to act and not act. And so I think this might help you as you think about serving your clients. And you might look at it at the surface as being pretty simplistic, but if you think about it, it might make a little bit more impact as I go through it. And the first is that people need to have a clear vision of the future, particularly if you deal with multiple people, but certainly with one person. A person that's not clear on where their goals are is likely not going to take action. The other thing is to understand where they are right now. As you've probably met with clients who have told you that they think they're in a better place than you based on your evaluation, think they are. And so having clarity about what is realistic, where are they right now, and what are the problems they face, and to get where they want to go, what are the potential barriers and issues that they have to overcome? And lastly, if they do accomplish their goals, what are some of the unintended consequences? So if you find that your clients are hesitant to take action, maybe not signing documents, you're scratching your head, maybe a little frustrated, as I was when I was an advisor, because the client was presented with great recommendations only not to take any action. Well, if that's the situation you're confronting, then generally one of these areas are not clear to that client. If we delve more into what really motivates people to take action, let me walk you through something that maybe you can find helpful as you think about your delivery system and how you work with clients. First of all, as we probably all know, what we need to be motivated, and usually it's either pain or fear is the primary motivator, and if we lack passion or don't have pain or fear, we're likely not to take action. So we need to have that component. The other thing is we need to have an instinct. It has to be something that intuitively is a driver with what it is we want to accomplish. And if we don't have that instinct, we're not likely to act. Thirdly, we have to have a will. There has to be focus, time, clarity, trust, and confidence so that we can move forward to the last part, which is the reason part. And maybe you've heard this saying is that people aren't logical. They don't make logical decisions. They make emotional decisions and use logic to rationalize that emotional decision. And so that's why reason kind of comes at the back end of this process. And then finally, even if somebody is motivated, they need to take action. And that can be inhibited by poor communications or conflicting human dynamics or not being clear or having conflicting values. So if you analyze your practice and you work with clients from those perspectives, I think things will start making sense. And it might be a good model for you to work on your workflow and how you present your services to your clients. If we look at the affluent marketplace, there's 3 different components that need to be in place for to work with that market. Now, as we go through this, and we're about to cover some of the services we offer, let me mention that because our focus is purely on the human dynamics and we don't provide any other services, our target market are clients with a net worth of about 15 to 20 million or above. But hopefully you'll be able to capture some of these ideas for your practice and be able to deliver to a broader array of clients. So the first thing is product superiority, and I think all of us in the advisory world certainly strive to provide that. The second thing is to be able to do your work in an exceptional way and to deliver those products and superiority or service superiority, but to be able to do it so that maybe it's done in a very professional way. And then thirdly, of course, is there's a need on their behalf for some level of intimacy in the relationship, someone to deeply listen to them, to look at things from a systems perspective, and to inspire them and to provide a comprehensive coordination. As far as where trust is formed, there's a little formula that I picked up, which you may have seen before. It's credibility plus reliability plus intimacy with very low self-orientation is what's the basis for building trust. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip over that slide, and I want to focus on this one. This may be familiar. It was written, it was part of the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, and maybe you've seen this before. But as you gaze on this image, I'd like you to tell me what that looks like to you. And there's a few different ways you could look at that. So that leads us into the next poll question, which is, what do you see when you gaze into that picture? So Tripp, why don't you take it away?
Thank you, Mike. Just as you said, when you first looked at the picture, which image did you see? Was it an old woman, the young lady? Did you see neither, or did you see both? And we'll let everyone have a chance to respond, and we'll get a good cross-section of everyone. Close the polls and share. Pretty good majority saw both there, Mike.
Yeah. Well, I know that's a familiar slide, so maybe everyone's seen that. But the point I wanted to make in that is everyone has a perspective of how they go and they work with their clients. And if you're not careful, you go into an engagement only focused on the things that are important to you, the things that you feel like you need to do to deliver your product and service. But the client, from the client's perspective, they have many different things that are going on in their life. And so it's very important that you not only look just for the facts, but you look for the softer issues of what's going on in that person's life, even if it doesn't relate directly to what you do. So, for example, when I was an advisor, we might spend a meeting helping a client develop goals and objectives and things of that nature, and then we'd press on to move forward in the recommendations and doing the work. Well, what we do at Da Vinci is sometimes we'll spend 3 to 6 months working with clients in various aspects of their life, continuing to develop their perspective on the world and to understand how they see things. Another thing that I throw out here as you were building a foundation is the internal versus external dialogue. And this is where you are meeting with a client and you're talking about issues and things, and then they're nodding their head yes, and you feel like they are in agreement with everything you have to say, and they might walk out the door and you don't hear back from them, or you don't get the response that you're thinking about. And part of that reason is because there's an external dialogue that you see that's going on in the meeting, but there's also an internal dialogue that's going in their head that they're not communicating with you. And the reasons they don't do that is because of things like they don't want to hurt you. They are worried about the status or what you think of them. It might be they don't want to be judged negatively. But all of those things are going on in the communications that you're having with your clients. So to be able to develop a process that's more in-depth on how you really dig into what's important to that client, you'll be able to uncover more of these internal dialogues that will be the keys for these being raving fans of yours as you go through serving your clients. So let's start looking at clients from a little bit different perspective. And what you see on the screen is just a mosaic, a tile mosaic. And think of it in terms as if this were a jigsaw puzzle. And that's the cover of the box. And if we had 1,000 pieces and we threw it out on the table, those pieces represent all of the issues going on in the lives of your clients. And what your clients are busy trying to do is to take all those issues and put them into piles. And as they get several piles together, it might be a pile for estate planning, or a pile on insurance, or a pile on investment, a pile on a leadership transition in their business, and so forth. They're looking for people that they need to have around them to help them. But what they want to do is they want to do that in a coordinated, collaborative manner, as opposed to just doing one thing at a time. So the key of putting together that jigsaw puzzle for them is to have that box top, to be able to see that vision. And that really is the culmination of you doing a wonderful job understanding every aspect of their life. Now, one of the first things we did when we were looking at people and helping to serve them, particularly as individuals, is we wanted to see them, of course, as individuals, as their thumbprint. And what was at the core of the study that I did with the psychologist was what makes people happy, and how do they get to some level of happiness. And so fundamentally what we saw is that people needed clarity about their vision. They needed to know what their purpose and to start living their purpose in their life. They had to connect with their passion, and they had to give back. And giving back was their vocation, their profession, as well as contributing in other ways to society at large. And what we did is we found out that there's really 4 different currencies that we have to express ourselves in those ways. The first one is time. We only have so much of it. Time is a currency that we just don't know how much we have. We don't know if we have one breath or many years in front of us. The other thing that gives us purpose and value in life is our talent, and to be able to express that and have be in alignment with your unique abilities and your purpose and calling in life. The third is the financial component, and of course that's what many of you on the call are working on, and the relationships aspect, because relationship is the only thing we could take with us, where money is the only thing that we could have an unlimited supply of. So that's what we came up with as we were looking at what do people have in order to move forward in life. And what we realized is that when people focus on one of these areas and don't consider the others, they tend to diminish the other areas and only to build up something in the one they're focused on. So an example of that would be to have a career path that is very rewarding in many respects, but doesn't provide the time to build relationships, but it may have a positive impact on money. So what we did was we started to work with people around how to make decisions that would balance out all 4 of those currencies, and to use them to balance out and what we found is those were the better decisions that people made. The other thing that you're probably familiar with is that each family has 6 different capitals in order to build a life, to build a future around. First is the spiritual capital, then the financial, human capital, which is who you are, your virtues, your character as a human being, your intellectual capital, not only your IQ, but your skills and abilities and life experiences. Your giving back, your social aspect of it, which unfortunately includes taxes, and then the entrepreneurial aspect of how we grow ideas and innovate and build businesses, whether we're working for someone else or working for ourselves. Another key component is the idea of working in a systematic way. So here's a chart of what is called a family business system. In each of these parts of the Venn diagram, what you see is not one problem, but a number of different problems that are part of a system. And there's a quote that says that if you work on one part of the system, you're going to affect all others. Da Vinci showed that if you everything is connected to everything else. So what I found is that advisors that tend to look at things from a systematic way tend to have more success, drive more revenue, and have stronger client bases that sometimes clients that sometimes when they focus on just one problem. Now, that's not necessarily true, because you do have specialists that collaborate with people that work in a systematic way, and they themselves are extremely successful in their own right. So that's more of a generalization, but it's really looking at it from a standpoint of where the world is going. If you think back when I started in the business in 1975, we had the business equipment was electronic typewriter. And then you had typewriters that were able to memorize a paragraph or a few sentences. And of course, now we have laptops and smartphones that do unbelievable type of things. Back when I started, the human component was very dominant and technology was minimized. Now, technology is overwhelming the human condition. And so as you think about the lives of your client and you look at it from, let's say, a blue ocean type of approach where you're trying to deliver innovative, unique services that are driven by your client's needs. In that capacity, and you know in your own life that it's hard for you to do everything that's important, and then we face usually every day with just doing the most urgent and never getting to the important things in life. So your clients are the same way, and the more you can provide for them coordinated, collaborative services that look at things from a systematic standpoint and simplify their lives, you're going to provide greater services to your clients by doing that in many cases. Again, there's always a place for specialists, so I don't want to diminish that, but from a standpoint of somebody has to provide those services, and depending upon your model, if your model is such that you're trying to provide ease of, trying to enhance the quality of your client's life from the standpoint of coordination, collaboration, it's real important to look at things from this vantage point, and then also to consider that each member of the family is sitting at one of those 7 places in that Venn diagram, and they all have different needs and different perspectives. And they all have a desperate need for things to be coordinated in their life. The other things is, of course, we have people on the outside that need to be coordinated and collaborated. When I ask advisors how much work they do on a collaborative basis, they usually say, well, we get together with other professionals occasionally. But usually we're just doing some coordination. So as you move forward, Harvard Business Review has said that this is the decade of collaboration, that because of the need to innovate around change that occurs in life, the speed of trust, that Covey wrote, and the need for trust on that level, and just the fact of making decisions. To be able to do that in a very quick way, there needs to be collaboration. To get into specifics of some of the ways we're going to move forward in our time is we're going to look a little bit more over the next few minutes is the growth of individuals and that component of life. Then we're going to look at how families interact with one another. We'll look at the governance for families, and we'll look at how businesses and family businesses operate. So that's the material that we're going to be covering. But we're doing it from a standpoint of collaboration where the advisory team is coming together. There's a coordination of planning, and there's some aspect of how information is managed in the relationship. And so with that in mind, let's talk about human growth from just from an individual point of view. In the Temple of Apollo, on the entranceway, there's inscribed, "Know thyself." And so before anyone can really do deep, purposeful planning, the first thing they have to do is to come into a relationship with themselves. They need to have some introspection, look at deep inside. Today, because of the world and the speed of life, oftentimes we look to external things in order to help us solve problems. But as we're going to see with Cicero down on the 4th bullet, it says, no one can give you better advice than yourself. And so with that in mind, as advisors, one of the things is rather than have an orientation of trying to fix people from the outside in, really what I would recommend you consider is the last quote that says, the purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out. And so one of those models that we talked about as we move to the right are developing practices where you're drawing out of the individual by asking them really profound questions so they can discover what it is that is really important to them. Unfortunately, that takes time, and time is money. But I think you will find that's time well spent if you could just really start to spend a little bit more time helping clients gain that level of insight. Because once they do that, and once they examine their life and see how much it's worth living and see what the possibilities are, then they got that level of motivation to really move forward aggressively with planning. So as we've gone through that process with our client and they see what they want to do, usually nothing will stop them from implementing the plan. We've seen time after time flurries of activities where clients engage with their advisors in a much more significant and meaningful way. I've seen hundreds of thousands of dollars invested in insurance programs because that insurance program was the way to get the person where they wanted to go. The same thing with investment portfolios. So by spending more time at the front end with your clients, helping them gain clarity about where they want to go, that's going to serve you. That's going to be the 100-fold return that you're looking for to get from your relationships with your client, and to provide them with services that's very hard to come by. So as you do that, what you might do from an individual perspective is use this simple methodology that I use with clients and just having some general discussions. And, I ask them, what do they love to do? That's question number one. And what are they good at? And let them have a chance to discuss all the things that people have told them they're great at and that they do so easily. And then what is it that the world needs that they have? And that's the give part of that example of the currencies of life that I talked about. And then finally, what do they think people would, most that people would pay for the services they have, or the passions and the skill sets they have? And once you finish that, you have the person's passion, their mission, their vocation, and their profession detailed out for them. And if you do that with people that aren't clear as to those issues, there's just a big smile that comes over their face as they see that unfolding for them. To dig a little bit deeper to understand people, you might want to look at them from different aspects. One is how they think. That's the cognitive area of their mind. And that's not only their IQ, but their life experiences and their unique abilities. Then there's the feeling part, the affective, the personality aspect, if you will. Back when we were looking at that, what motivates people to act, it's the motivation, it's the emotions, it's the preferences and the desires. And then lastly, how they go about doing things. How are they wired in that respect? And when they're given a task to do something, how do they go about doing it? So when you examine people from that point of view and those perspectives, you really understand them, and most importantly, you could deliver services to them as uniquely as they want to have those services delivered. And of course, all of these things that I've been talking about are available through Behavior DNA and many of those different assessment tools that helps you look at them through the eyes of who they are, and to be able to customize every aspect of the work you do. And I recommend, whenever I'm working with advisors, and I talk to them about ways to enhance their firm and to do it very quickly and impactfully, and to bring a great new dimension to their firm. Behavior DNA has developed from when you and I first met in 2002 to today. It's just a phenomenal tool because it puts all that information in the context of how people do life. Unlike DISC or Myers-Briggs or some of the other programs that are out there, they really don't relate it to how people behave from everyday life standpoint, and more importantly, how you can deliver services. So I commend you and his team for the great work they've done along that path. Something that a tool that I use that you might find helpful is I call Wealth Snapshot, and this is a component of it. It's part of a bigger program that we do, but I oftentimes do this with people at the front end of an engagement. And that is, I ask them from a level of 1 to 9, with 9 being complete contentment. And I use the word contentment rather than satisfaction because if somebody is content, they're not going to move forward. So I want to understand where they are. So what I do is I talk to people about what is the definition of wealth to them. which leads into this presentation. And so once they describe it, I talk to them about what we see are the 12 realms of wealth. Those different components that, when combined collectively together, in total produce a picture of someone's wealth, not only in financial terms, but in non-financial terms. And so the first box inside, we have them ranked that, as you can see, from 1 to 9. And in the red area, 1 to 3 are people that are very discontented. From 6 to 9, 7 to 9 are people that are very, very content but have some improvement that are needed. And then, of course, in the middle range, that there is a level of discontentment that they need to take care of. And so once they go around that and evaluate that, then we have them set priorities. Those priorities are important because not all 12 aspects of the realm of wealth are equal at every given time. But we then take that information, and through just a calculation we use, we build a wealth index. And that wealth index is just a marker in the point in time. Maximum would be 100 if you were content in all areas of your life. So what we do is we look at that both from an individual standpoint, and we measure that every 6 months with the client. And then, but we also do with the entire family, and that helps us see where the family is. Before we do with the family, of course, we have to build a foundation of trust, but that's one aspect of what we do. And this is very quick. It takes 5 minutes to do, but usually people have a couple hours of discussion that comes from this. The next thing we do is we have them do a life story. This is called the lifeline. You may be familiar with it. What we do is we break it down into three components: their talent, their money, and their relationships. And then we do a composite of all three of those together. And what we're trying to do here is to have them ranked from 10, a positive 10 being an exceptional life experience, to a negative 10, the depths of the deepest valley in their life. And we do this and have them write down the events that have shaped who they are. And this has been very helpful to understand their story from a standpoint of understanding their perspective of life. If they've had abuse in the family, if they've had been encouraged through life, if they've had challenging, unstable relationships, all of these things would be very valuable to know, because those things are going to influence who they are as human beings. So the next thing we do, it's valuable in doing that from that perspective, is the learned behavior comes from the lifeline. That is, we're shaped by our experiences. But we also have a natural behavior, which DNA does a wonderful job being able to evaluate both the learned and the natural behaviors. But those are the things underneath the surface that, candidly, oftentimes when I'm working with spouses that have been married 20 or 30 years, they really don't understand what shaped their spouse and what causes them to behave in certain ways, some of which are the most frustrating things they have to deal with, but they don't understand that that comes back from understanding who they were in their younger years, and the impact of the voices and the things they were told and the experiences they had. And so when we meet with clients for the first time, we're looking at their learned behavior. And you might have had clients that have gone through difficult issues, maybe economic downturn, and that usually calm and very polite person becomes very ugly to deal with, perhaps. And you wonder, where did that come from? And of course, that's somewhat of their natural behavior coming to the surface. So using the tools like DNA will really help in navigating some of these treacherous waters that are out there because of the things that you don't see that are underneath the surface. Another thing we found very helpful that you might want to consider is we take all the information that we compile from the discussions we have with clients, and we build a narrative which is oftentimes 20, 30, or 40 pages long, which really discusses every aspect of who they are and their preferences and their thinking. And this is actually just a partial list of some of the things we covered, and you can see that there's a lot of different things here. But these are the guiding philosophy, the guiding principles that are important to our clients. And so you can imagine if you're working with a a client and another advisor brings you a document that's 20 or 30 pages that lets them explain through that document exactly who these people are, what motivates them, what's important, that when you get down to, when you understand what the whys are, it's really the priorities, the what, but when you really get down to how to do something, everything just falls into place when you have that. And that's real important, of course, in the collaborative model, in coordinating with all of the advisors, that everybody be on the same page. Everybody understands the voice of the client as they go through their thought process and making recommendations to their client. What we do is we develop what's called the life plan, and it's a one-page sheet of paper, albeit it's in very small print, and it covers 7 different topics. So the first topic is what we call life philosophy. So this is the person's purpose, their passion, their mission, their vision, their core values, their guiding principles. The next thing is to know themselves. So this is where we actually put some DNA information in and some other assessments that we use so that they and the people that see this life plan, which are the other advisors, really understand that and how they tick. We go into their priorities, which is the 12 realms of wealth. And in each 12 realms, we have what we call the one thing. And so when we work with clients, each year we help them develop the one thing in each of the 12 realms of wealth. So the 12 things that they're going to focus on in that year to improve their level of contentment with all aspects of their wealth. It also talks about your baggage that you have, your unique abilities, the number of hats you wear, and what those hats are. Then we go into goals, and these are the big, hairy, audacious goals, the bucket list, the targets to reach, things of that nature. And then we go into actions. And the first thing we talk about are speed bumps. What are the things that the clients, what causes them to slow down in taking action? What are the commitments they're willing to make? Not tries or attempts, but what are their commitments that they have in life? And more importantly, what do they do to celebrate the successes that they have, both as individuals and a family? We go on to helping them identify and draw up what are exactly the perfect days in their life, the perfect work days, leisure days, family days, and help them come up with a time management system to enjoy more of those perfect days. And if you don't know what a perfect day is, you're likely not to live it. And then finally, what are your favorites? What are your closest circles of friends? What are the ways you enjoy giving back? What are your family traditions? What are the things you just like to do? So, and then another tool, I'll just show you this because I want to wrap it up for some little Q&A, is we have what we call canvases. We do a canvas. We have a business model. We use this to help businesses model who they are and reinvent themselves. So they end up being more like Netflix instead of Blockbusters, or Southwest instead of some other airline. And we do this by having them ask the what and the why questions as well as how they're going to do it. And every business has 9 components of how they need to go about doing things, the key 9 elements. But what we found is we do this for nonprofits because they too have the 9 elements, and we actually do it for people developing a personal business model, which is, as individuals, how are they going to give back and how are they going to drive revenue and benefits, and what are the costs they have to give up to deliver value propositions in their work and so forth. And these models are useful because they're 50,000-foot views, and when you step back and you look at what you write down in those little boxes, it's very easy for you to reinvent yourself or redesign what the model is, that whether it's a business model to how to deliver your products and services in new and innovative ways, or actually how just to communicate to other people what you're all about, what your business is all about, or what your nonprofit's about. It's basically a storyboard to explain your business and what you aspire to do as an individual. So these are just some of the thoughts and tools that we use when we work with individuals around growing helping them as firms to grow the individuals that they work with, the family members they work with, or the business leaders they work with. And we're going to, the next part two, we'll be focusing on now, rather than just from a more individual perspective, how do we really start to deal with groups of people to be able to help families or multiple families that own businesses and things like that, deal with conflict, move forward in confidence, be able to communicate well, and what are the keys to communicating, the tools to communicating. So I hope you were able to join us for these the next 3 months. Thank you for your time today, and I'd like to maybe turn it over to you to open it up for some Q&A. But before I do that, just a quick note, you mentioned the Rising Leaders Forum. What we're developing is affinity groups where we have roughly 12 individuals that are part of rising generations within family businesses. And it's basically a mentoring and education program that's specifically designed over a 3-year period as a prerequisite for these rising generations to steward the wealth of the family and the family business, to be able to be educated not only in the technical aspects but the human aspects of things. And then we're doing Rising Generations Forum, which are primarily for rising generations where there's not a family business involved, but they still need to steward the family wealth. And so we'll present some more information on this. We're just rolling this out. The first groups will start July 1st of this year. So why don't you take it from here?
Thank you, Mike, for a great presentation. And, you know, what I think everyone can see from the presentation is the depth of work that you've done in pulling together, you know, a very comprehensive, specific, actionable program for helping families get to the next stage. And of course, this starts with a family member. But I thought it might be good, Mike, for you just to talk a little bit more about, you know, this process on growth that you have, that you've outlined very well. Just to go in a bit further depth, why it's important that the family members all go through this process individually so that the family is more prepared for taking the next steps.
Well, there's an old saying, which everybody's probably heard before, you know, if you don't know where you're going, any path will take you there. And so I think it's fundamental before anybody's going to make any progress, not only as an individual, but as a group, that the members of that group must know what it is that's important to them and be able to articulate that in a very succinct and clear manner. If people aren't clear and they come to the table and they don't know what it is that is important to them, it's impossible for them to join in a process of making major decisions, whether it regards financial and non-financial matters.
Yeah, I think that's the answer I was looking for, Mike. I just wanted you to reinforce that with the group in that, you know, which you've made the point very clearly, if you don't know yourself and have real clarity of that and your life purpose, then it's very hard to be in that family setting to make a collective decision as to what's going to happen going forward. So that was really the key point that needed to come out today, that there needs to be a lot of preparation by each family member in terms of working on themselves before they're ready to come together in terms of any family meeting or you know, family decision making, which would be, you know, in the next phases of the presentations that you're going to talk about in terms of how we run family meetings, the governance processes, etc.
Yeah, and we'll cover that next time, but in the aspect of, you know, meeting with each of the major stakeholders one-on-one to be able to understand their perspective is the right way to go about any type of work of this nature. And to not do that, it's fraught with landmines in the process, and it's not advisable. Yeah.
So that's all we have for today. I don't see any other questions in the chat box, so we'll wrap it up. So we just wanted to, on behalf of DNA Behaviour and Mike, thank everybody for being on the call today. And as Mike mentioned, we'll be having follow-on calls that explore, you know, other key issues that are there in terms and processes that are there in terms of working with families.
Sounds good. We're going to wrap up the recording, and everyone will receive a copy of the presentation as well as a copy of the recording itself. There's also a handout available as to family dynamics that you can share amongst your clients and your teammates. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you very much, everybody.